The dream is to acquire as much Bitcoin as possible and never sell it. But if you don't sell your Bitcoin, then how do you establish yourself? How do you buy real estate? What can you do? Shout out to everybody here on my channel. I got into Bitcoin around, 800, $1,000. Started getting into cryptocurrencies back in 2016. I'm a person that's a firm believer of not selling your Bitcoin. And I always said, one day we're going to be able to collateralize it and we won't have to sell it. We'll be able to put it up as collateral and use it, pay maybe some type of finance loan, and maybe we can get into real estate. And right now you have $1 trillion worth of Bitcoin locked up. My man Sasha Mitchell here with BeL2. Is that how you would say the company's name, or exactly right?
Yeah, that's the one, BeL2.
Yeah, BeL2. And what BeL2 is they're innovating the trillion dollar locked up in Bitcoin. And explain who you are, how you got into the space before we dive too deep. But I'm just really excited, everyone. I want to take you through this new innovative way to use Bitcoin. Sasha, how you been, man? How's your day?
Yeah, hey, it's a pleasure to be here, Lifer. And yes, I mean, so much innovation going on in the space. And it's a space which I've been in for well over 6 years now. A lot of my journey started around the 2017 ICO craze, and I actually created a platform called ICGo where I just logged all the different ICOs going on, all the different initial coin offerings. So this was the time when Ethereum had just started to establish itself, smart contracts were becoming available, and there was this gold rush moment of being able to raise capital to build out all these applications. Many of them, brought in some bad actors, but regardless, to this day, we still have ones that are building away, and it created that initial injection, which led to innovations, which I'll talk about shortly regarding BeL2, which allow us to essentially allow Bitcoin to do more. Because for our belief, Bitcoin is the next global financial system, and it's a digital gold currently. But how do we allow it to do more? Yeah, so my journey starts. I mean, it starts slightly earlier, playing around with cryptos and trading, just really just Bitcoin, and then a little bit of Litecoin as well, and getting burnt in the markets. But then ultimately, come 2017, I had a real interest to learn the underlying system. What is blockchain? These distributed ledgers. It's really bringing trust into a trustless environment. So how can we manage our finance and rights in a more efficient and transparent way, and one which can't be manipulated by centralized gatekeepers? And that led me to study blockchain strategy with Oxford University, with the SAD University. And then really, when I was creating this directory, I came across one project which really stood out to me, and it was called Elastos. So we mentioned BeL2, but what that stands for is the Bitcoin Elastos Layer 2 protocol. And really, Elastos, what inspired me was the culture in which the founder, Rong Chen, was building for this idea of a safer internet with a future where we can actually own and monetize our own digital assets, rather than relying again on these central gatekeepers. Now, he actually in the late 80s studied at Chicago, Illinois, working with supercomputers. And then in the 90s, he was the 10th employee to be employed at Microsoft Internet Explorer. So he went on to pioneer not only just the internet as we know it today through the browser, but also some of the early iterations. There was a browser called Mosaic. And then also the actual operating system of Microsoft. So the boom and the innovation that he felt in the 90s going into the 2000s was gave him a wealth of experience, not in just operating systems, but in how the architecture of computers need to be formulated. So he had a fundamental belief about blockchain being the missing piece to managing rights and finance, but bringing the architecture of these operating systems to essentially create an environment where we can protect our own data and we can monetize it globally. So I was sold. I've been in that ecosystem for since 2007, late 2017, 18. And one of its core offerings is it has ELA, which is its coin for the ecosystem, but it's merge mined with Bitcoin. And this is kind of where it gets really interesting, because in 2010, Satoshi put out on the Bitcoin forum, he put out this idea of merge mining with Bitcoin, which is to say, rather than creating forks of Bitcoin or creating competing Bitcoins, why don't you tap into the Bitcoin miners' security, where the Bitcoin miners essentially could earn another currency for giving the same answers they give to Bitcoin for mining its blocks, but for mining another blockchain. So it's not only it's more resourceful in the efficiency, but actually what it does is you tap into the miner security, which for Bitcoin today is worth, over $1 trillion. That security is why we love Bitcoin. When you hold Bitcoin on the main network, you're secure and you're safe because there's a global, over 1 million miners today all working together to secure it. So Elastos actually since 2018 has had 50% of Bitcoin's miners securing the ELA ecosystem. So I kind of then entered as an investor to get more involved in that side. But then as I came down the path as a community member, I just learned more about the community, about the technology. Rong Chen to me was a mentor, and the co-founder of Elastos was someone called Sunny Fen Hang, who again went on to inspire and to kind of bring me on over time into BeL2. So my background has stemmed around working with engineers as a project owner. I have a project which is very focused on digital rights management. And it was within that work that I was then asked, can I come in and support the BeL2 network as head of operations? And that's where things get really exciting, because if Bitcoin is a store of value as a digital gold, how can we enable it to do more? And how can we do more without selling it? Because I think a lot of people who get Bitcoin, they hold it knowing that it's going to go up in value over time. It's got all the game theory, it's got the scarcity, you've got the security, but that liquidity, which is over $1 trillion and growing today, what if you could unlock it to for instance, issue a stable coin which is backed in Bitcoin? Or what if you can actually take out, collateralize and take loans out against it? These are great use cases, but previous attempts to try these have usually relied on a custodian. Like we had BlockFi for loans, and we had these blow-ups that happened as a result of entrusting our Bitcoin with others. And we could talk about wrapped Bitcoin as well, because again, you rely on a custodian and you give up your Bitcoin to get that service. Now, the whole purpose of what we're achieving here is the ability to collateralize using decentralized wallets, to send signals to a smart contract, messages rather than the asset itself, and then to unlock these new features. And that's where we start to get more technical in the weeds. But that's a general background
Yeah.
from my side and where I've come from.
Yeah, because beautiful. Like, so are you an Oxford grad too? Is that like, or are you still in Oxford right now? Or
So not I didn't go to Oxford itself, but I studied their blockchain
excellent,
strategy course.
excellent. Yeah. So the coolest. I mean, you've been around. I mean, you've been with some of the greatest minds in the space. What I love about it, and what's interesting, it's good and bad, is that some of the highest technical leaders, they're so hard for people to understand, right? That some people don't even know who they are, right? They're like unsung heroes a lot of times, right? It's kind of funny how like we don't even know who Satoshi Nakamoto is, right? uh
Mm.
I think that's special in a way because it leads to, like, it's definitely a labor of love. I find a lot of people in blockchain are here for the tech. They realize they can change, but they're almost like legacy people that realize they're doing something for the greater good of humanity. There is a lot of money in it. Don't get me wrong. If you hit, you come up with a good project and you're able to see it through. But it's fun, it's fascinating, right? When I hear you talk and I see how many people you know and the connections. But that's like a whole underworld, right? That more people should know about. And so yeah, the average person here on my channel, they're stacking Bitcoin, right? Because I'm stacking Bitcoin, and so they watch me for years now. And so we're all kind of believers in the Bitcoin ecosystem. We know they're going to print money to zero. Every time I think of taking profits in Bitcoin, I'm always like, but like, if I hold another 5 years, I should be up again. So why would I sell it? I've thought about selling it at the top and going back in, but they're taxable events when you've gotten in really early. And so,
Mm.
like, you don't want to create a taxable event, but how could I still access the liquidity, right? And that's kind of where we sit. So with you, it's the idea that through somehow ZK Sync smart contract connection, right, where I don't have to give up my private keys, everyone, because the idea is when I send Bitcoin to these other places where I could easily do lending and loaning, I'm going to have to enter it into another decentralized wallet, like, a Sats Hunter, whatever the wallet is, right, an ordinal wallet. And then I'm gonna have to, then it's out of my private wallet at that point, right? And then I have to actually send it to the protocol. And if they get hacked, if there's a liquidity, if something happens, I become involved, right? So I want to be able to access my Bitcoin, but I don't want to give up my security. I've been looking for this solution for a long time. When my team found this, I said, "Is this real?" So explain to me. I went through your website and I looked at it, and it was saying like, you know, Alice buys, basically borrows from Bob. But what if Bob, but to get her Bitcoin back, when she pays back the loan, like let's just say she gives Bob zero point 0.5 Bitcoin, she gets Tether. She wants to pay the loan back, but to pay the loan back, Bob has to actually interact with her and satisfy that, right? How do we make
Mm.
sure that happens? I read through it, but explain that a little bit because that's what people really want to know because we're still skeptical. Like, how do we know this is going to go through? How do we know when we give our Bitcoin, we're going to get the money? How do we know this transaction? And what parameters do you put to basically penalize people from not doing the right things inside of the ecosystem?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and so the architecture, so the BeL2 architecture really is an interoperability protocol. So it's allowing Bitcoin to talk with other blockchains. Now the goal is that Bitcoin can stay on the main network and be collateralized. And rather than bridging assets across where you're giving your Bitcoin to a custodian who's then minting another asset on the other side, and then you could collateralize wrapped Bitcoin, for instance, on a smart contract. What you can do on Bitcoin is you can have locking scripts. So it's almost like a UTXO. It's almost like you have a check that you're routing to a person, but it hasn't been sent yet. So it's kind of floating, but there's only two addresses. It's either, in this case, if we use a loan example, it's either the lender of money's Bitcoin address that it's going to get routed to, or it's your own, it's getting sent back to you. So what we want to envision is you can collateralize your Bitcoin with two addresses, be it that the other party is on another blockchain, but they offer their Bitcoin address. When you prove you've collateralized your Bitcoin, you can generate what's called a zero knowledge proof, which is a proof that you have done this task. Without having to give away the details, you can actually verify using these protocols that you have done that transaction. It's all verifiable on the blockchain because blockchains are also public, everyone can see. But the zero knowledge proof is actually a piece of information that then can be passed into another blockchain smart contract like Ethereum's loan contract, which can then execute a function. So if we look at the user flow, we can imagine someone, let's say on Ethereum or on Elastos's network, we have an Ethereum virtual machine. You can deposit some USDC into a smart contract. So you can then say, this is going to be available for a Bitcoin holder to loan against. I'd like 3% APY. The duration will be 6 months. And if it's say $10,000 that I put in the contract, the Bitcoin holder must collateralize in a bigger amount to allow for volatility. So what we want to imagine now is that there's lots of lenders on a layer two who are putting USD Tether or USDC or whatever into smart contracts. So as a Bitcoin holder, I can actually see all of these lenders. And then actually, I'm going to make a decision that I want to borrow against one of them. So they provide their Bitcoin wallet. I then put my Bitcoin into a locking script based on the terms that they've set out. It's got their address and my return address. When that happens, a zero knowledge proof is generated, and we have what's called an arbiter network that essentially is a network in between the Bitcoin users and the layer two participants. And their job, they are actually collateralized themselves in the equivalent value. So they're not allowed to process a transaction unless they have the equivalent value of collateral themselves. So
Interesting.
so you will pick an arbiter node, and
So
they
this
will
makes
also
sense
again,
now because that's the backing. Because I'm like, where did it come? Okay. Okay. Yeah.
yes. So the arbiter nodes are essentially they are a third party, but they're decentralized nodes on a global network. So it's not just one service. Actually, anyone can become an arbiter node, and again, they can set a small fee that they would like to receive if they need to arbitrate. So if something goes wrong, you can call upon the arbiter node to support you. And if the arbiter node did something wrong themselves, because it's all verifiable on the blockchain, you can actually call upon the arbiter for misconduct, and you can receive their collateral. So there's basically a game theory dynamic on how you make a fair system. But going back to the user journey, so I've collateralized my Bitcoin. It does the arbiter's wallet address isn't in the locking script, so there's no way that they can receive the actual underlying collateralized Bitcoin. It's just going either to the lender or back to me as the borrower. The zero knowledge proof is then passed across into the smart contract, which confirms it's being collateralized. That then releases the USDC or USDT. Now I've now got this my loan, and I can go spend it however I want. And hopefully, like good and bad debt, you do it in a meaningful way where you can then bring yield back. As you generate yield and as you use it productively, you can pay the smart contract back over time. And if it's done within the time limit, you've successfully completed the payback with the interest on top. And then, given that there's no problems, you and the lender can co-sign. You and the lender can co-sign together, and then that will then tell the Bitcoin blockchain to return my Bitcoin back. But now, in the case that on two scenarios, it's time sensitive. So actually, I want to get my Bitcoin back. I paid back the smart contract, but the lender isn't co-signing with me to make that happen. I can then call upon the arbiter as the third party that's always there and available. Now, they do have a small fee that they will take in the Bitcoin transaction for their service, but regardless, like they will make it happen quick with you if you need it to happen. So you can co-sign then with the selected arbiter who has been a part of the transaction since the start when you selected them. And in that scenario, I get it back. On the flip side, if I wasn't to pay back the loan on time, and actually now the lender has the ability, because the terms weren't met, they have the ability to actually take the collateral that was put down. They can otherwise do it with me because we both agreed I didn't do it, but they can also call upon the arbiter, and that can happen. And then the danger is, what if the arbiter and one of the other parties collude
Yeah.
and do something bad? Well, if they do that, because everything is on the blockchain and it's verifiable, the person who feels the injustice can then submit a zero knowledge proof themselves, which basically verifies that this is not fair based on the
Yeah, the
blockchain
contract
transaction.
wasn't correct. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then the arbiter who has to put their collateral in a smart contract, they will then have that taken from them. So there's an incentive mechanism for arbiters to do good. And obviously, what we want to imagine is when you're actually going to do a transaction and you select an arbiter, we have a competition going on between arbiters. So we have arbiters who have even higher collateralization than they need, or we have a history of
Like that.
how many transactions they've serviced. And likewise, there'll be small arbiters for small transactions, but then like institutional arbiters maybe for like very large transactions. But yeah, that's an overarching view of the BeL2 system, and it's really loans and also stable coins that are really interesting. And we recently had a new team announce that they're going to build a stable coin product, which I think is very interesting too.
I mean, yeah, you answered a lot of the things. It's intricate. Not everyone will know exactly what you're saying, like, but we can see how each scenario is met by a zero knowledge proof, which can then basically reimburse the hurt party regardless. And we shouldn't have a hurt party because of the competitions from the arbiters who are there to make a small fee anyway. And so they're going to want to make, and I like how you said they'll over collateralize, which will create. See, that's the thing, and it's the opposite of our system now, right? Our system just continues to uncollateralize to the point where there's nothing left, right? They derivative, and they just keep taking from the initial value till there's really no value left at all, right? This would
Yeah.
kind of be the opposite. Like we would grow towards people over collateralizing to get, more substantial ratings to be able to take higher participation in the financial system. It's kind of amazing if you think about it. As small as it is, it's actually like the beginning of the newest, like the human race could change forever with this, right? It could impact the way we do business forever on a exponential scale, more than I think me and both of you even realize, right? Because we don't know how this sprinkle of sand will eventually evolve, right?
It's
Uh,
one of the most pressing issues of today is the global debt crisis. And you look at it. I think everyone can understand inflation, but when you look at, for the US at least, who this year surpassed $35 trillion in debt, It took 200 years for the US to get $1 trillion worth of debt. And now every 3 months, the US is printing $1 trillion of debt. So we're in this stage where it's exponentially speeding up. And as you mentioned, we kind of all know where this is heading, because governments, they're not going to sober, populations as a whole aren't going to be willing to sober up to the reality. And it's going to be always kick the can down the road and actually print more in the times in which, you get these crunches and these moments where decisions have to be made. And yes, so currencies are, ever since Nixon for the US dollar dropped the Bretton Woods system, the being backed with gold, it really opened up the fiat standard as far as, just print as much as you can, and all currencies are floating. So what we want to bring back, and this is what we're really trying to achieve with BeL2, is we want to bring back a new financial system that's anchored in Bitcoin. And that means you can't break the rules, because it's being enforced by Bitcoin miners globally. And that, I think, can create a very stable future. And as you mentioned, when everything's being collateralized in Bitcoin, the underlying asset isn't being manipulated. And actually what you're going to get is a much more thought out allocation of capital. Because I think what we see today is misallocation of capital from printing going all over the world and being used in ways which isn't really like responsible. And even companies, you get zombie companies. And what we want is money going to the right places and being used in a free market, which people really want to see innovation in, and then getting the rewards from that.
Yeah, it's like the way the system works, like if you know the system well, it's like worth liquidating companies, and you know what I mean? It's strange. It's like when people really understand how money works and debt works, it's like that's why people buy companies and run them to the ground, right? It's like it could be a
Mm,
write-off purpose for another business, or it's just there's so much back end liquidity that you're right. People just they just do whatever, right? They go bankrupt on purpose. Like it just, you know what I mean? Like it kind of, as far as it's legal and it's fine, but does it progress the human race, right? No.
no.
A lot of things that we're doing now, like I even think when I go to the store and I eat food and all the things we throw out, like the first person, a little off topic, but the first person, it goes to efficiency though, but the first person that made something that we threw away that we knew wasn't going to really disintegrate, we should have stopped there like that first year and been like, whoa, 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 like we got to only put things in that can disintegrate. Otherwise, we have to just keep it in a flask or. And we said, no, no, no. It's more important to sell and get a bottom line and run that company and get quarterly earnings. And so, no, no, just put it in plastic. And now we're at a point where everyone has microplastics in their body, right? It's everywhere. And you're like, whoa, 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 and I hope this is the beginning. It's interesting. This also brings up another idea, though. It's like you have the innovative creators that usually have a pretty good peaceful mind. Like they kind of have like their legacy. And when I say legacy, it means they care more about how they leave the world than their own pockets, right? They want
Mm,
to do something to better off the world. Like they realize you can get rich doing that. Don't get me wrong. There's always a sense of entrepreneurship. I think we all should be there's some human greed to all of us to enhance our lives, right? Can we
yeah.
use that to enhance other people's lives, right? And I think blockchain people have that the most, but then we have the legacy banking system that's holding on to these that they're and they don't want transparency. Like they don't want us understanding that we could make more APY on our money or that they were actually making more money on our money than we knew. Like, and so when you expose us, when you create a smart contract, indirectly you also expose someone else's like dirty game in a way, right? And it's so like as we innovate, we also create insecurities around the financiers that control the world. And there's a battle going on. And I see it. It's like an under like no one wants to talk about it, but
Yeah.
it can be also more serious than people realize. Like some people disappear and stuff. It's crazy, right? So um, how do you deal with that? Like, how do you deal with realizing that you're at the forefront of changing the financial system? Like, it's more than just numbers in ones and zeros. How does that make you feel?
Yeah, we've had internal discussions about this too, because it's like, especially especially when it's in finance, you're right. And what we're seeing around the world is kind of a monetary meltdown of currencies, and really creative destruction in currencies, in finance, but more broadly across rights management as well, be it through how well, yeah, so how our online rights are managed through centralized gatekeepers, that's going to change a lot too, in the way that we can actually control our data and monetize it with the world and capture all that revenue that we otherwise give away. But certainly finance is probably the first thing that's going to get really disrupted, and it's happening through Bitcoin. But throughout history, I don't think you can stop it. This is just a part of nature. Throughout history, you have creative destructions in all kinds of things. Like, technology drives efficiency, it drives innovation, and it's there to empower the individual. So over time, you become increasingly more empowered by the tools that you get access to. An example would be, I don't know, like using horses to get around, and then suddenly cars becoming available. And actually, now we put horses in the back of our kind of trucks or in the back to take them to fields to ride around for fun. It completely changes how everything operates or how we did things. And for cars, really now we're looking at robots taking over. Tesla is a robot that's a self-driving car. We're seeing the next generation of electric cars coming out, and they're all self-driving. So there's going to be another big creative disruption in that chain. And the best analogy is always the Netflix and Blockbuster analogy of at the time when so Netflix was all about timing. They knew that bandwidth wasn't fast enough when they were trying to compete with blockbusters. So what they did is they actually created Love Film, which was like a stepping stone where you would instead of streaming online, you could actually get the DVD sent to you in the post. So it's
Oh
like
yeah.
a step
I
closer.
remember I was on Netflix. I got the DVDs in my house. I was like,
Yeah, I mean,
oh,
it was pretty good. I remember it too. But there was a point where Blockbuster was offered, "Do you want to buy Netflix?" And they kind of laughed at them and said, we're actually focused on building out candy aisles in our stores. That's going to be the big next thing." And then that point overnight, where the technology allowed for the bandwidth and streaming to become possible, what was Blockbuster's biggest asset was their distribution. So they had physical shops all around the world, and they were able to take advantage of that. How do you compete with all of that distribution? But overnight, streaming made their assets their biggest liability, because suddenly someone's doing it online through streaming, and they
don't
don't
need all
need all
that.
of that
You have all this rent
distribution.
you're paying, yeah, yeah, you're done. Like
It
you
just
got to sell those
completely
movies
changed.
immediately. Yeah.
And the same goes for finance and banking. Someone made the analogy of, well, people say Bitcoin's expensive, but how much did it cost to build all the brick and mortar buildings that runs finance today across the world? And these are all essentially becoming increasingly more becoming bigger liabilities as everything becomes digital and it becomes online. And if anyone could become a miner and help contribute to that system, it doesn't need a financial institution. I mean, it is concerning, but it is also in the best interest of humanity and how things move forward. And then how that goes into the next era. What we want to envision, at least from my side, is creative destruction is going to force people into Bitcoin and gold and silver, but into assets which they feel safe in. And the printing over time is going to become increasingly more geopolitical. So governments are also going to start running to these assets as a safe haven, because there's a first mover
That's right.
advantage.
Yeah.
But then what we want is, once you have that asset, how can you collateralize it and do more with it? And through things like BeL2, you can actually then enter into a new environment where you can either take stable currencies out or you can issue stable currencies. But the point is, it's all under blockchain law. And under blockchain law, it's run by miners who are people all around the world who are helping work together to uphold the ledger, meaning that you don't have the centralized manipulation and the issues we see today. So I do believe it's just we're seeing a paradigm shift, and it might take longer than we think, but really this is a huge innovation, the blockchain technology and how it can be applied to all different types of industries.
Yeah, and last but not least, I want to wrap it up. Keep it quick because the attention span these days is light. But the like, can I do it now? Is it available now? Is it ready to go? Or are we still in the beginning stages? Can I go to the site and actually do this? Or
So
when are you launching? Where can they go? Where can people find out and interact
cool.
with the smart contract?
Yeah, so we released the loan demo earlier this year, But again, the Arbiter network that I spoke of, that's going to come end of this year. So I think that's when we see the full system version 1 being like available. And one of the biggest stories we've had in the last month is actually a Harvard student and alumni team have announced this project called New Bretton Woods, and they're actually going to build on top of BeL2 a Bitcoin-backed stablecoin solution. And they actually were selected by Harvard Innovation Labs to be incubated for this goal. And that, again, is, I think, really exciting. So we're going to have their white paper probably coming out in the next few weeks. I encourage all the listeners to head over to BeL2.org, just learn a little bit more about what we're building. But also, if you follow us on Twitter or you follow us in Telegram, in any case, keep an eye out for the New Bretton Woods labs as well, because these guys are, they're going to be releasing their white paper and they're going to be coming out with a stable coin. And I think that's going to get interesting too, using your decentralized wallet to collateralize Bitcoin and issue a stable coin, which can then be used across all these different services in the Web3 environment. Again, this is it's a system anchored in Bitcoin, but with the security of Bitcoin's miners. So I encourage everyone to check that out too.
Amazing, man. So much innovation. This is so nice talking to you, Satya. And really, really appreciate it, man. Do you have a Twitter too? Can people follow you on Twitter? Are you doing that, or anywhere they can follow you? Is it really just
Sure.
bel2.org you want people to go to? Just want to see if you want to get out there what you're doing.
Oh yeah. Well, if you want to follow me, I'm at sash__MIT,
Excellent.
and you can find me on X, and I'm tweeting usually every day. But always a pleasure to meet similar minds, people who are aware of what's going on in the system and also excited about where we're heading. And it's an absolute pleasure to jump on this call, Lifer, and always a pleasure.
Thank you. I'll be following you, looking for your retweets, and thank you so much for your time, man. This was amazing. Everybody, bel2.org, BEL2.org. And that's where going to be the new innovation of finance, where you can access the liquidity that your Bitcoin already possesses and interact with Web3 in a way you've never thought possible. This is amazing. Thank you so much for your time, man. I appreciate it. Everyone, please like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the bell for notifications. You can find out when we post our next video. Remember, if you came to the channel, then you're already doing the right thing. Crypto is life.